Luke chapter 5, we're going to talk about a story in the Bible. And I found out what Pastor Micah taught on last week, future followers. How many of you heard that message last week, future followers? They're online. If you didn't hear it, it's on Storyside. You can watch it. Really great message. And I just wanted to maybe be a part 2 to that message because it's such an important message for all of us as Christians, not just at Storyside, but as believers, to get the message of the good news, to get the message of the gospel out to our friends, to our families, to our communities, and see what Jesus died for, the local church, thrive in our communities, in our nation, in our world, in this generation. We are seeing unprecedented influence in the local church, from the local church into our communities, and we get to be a part of that. And so as this idea of future followers, what is it all about? Well, it's about that chair right there that's empty. Who's going to sit in that chair someday? That one in the back, the two right there in the back that are right next to each other, what couple is going to fill those chairs someday? They're going to walk in to a service right here. These chairs that sit empty, in this room there's not very many of them, but consider the future followers that will come into these doors, onto this campus, and say yes to Jesus for the very first time, or even as a recommitment, but their lives will be changed forever. And maybe we have a part to play in that. And so we find ourselves in Luke chapter 5, and we're going to start in verse 17. One day, Jesus was teaching, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and from Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Verse 18, some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they turned away disappointed and went home. Oh, that didn't say that. Okay. You are paying attention. See? Good for you. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof. On the roof, people. And lowered him on his mat. Through the tiles in Mark, it says they were digging through the mud and the mortar of getting through the tiles. And they not dropped, but like probably like shimmy roped, pulley roped this guy. Is that a word? I don't know. Go with it. I'm going with it. They lowered this guy down into the room right in front of Jesus. And then in verse 20 it says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said, friend, your sins are forgiven. So let's just break down this story a little bit. Who is in this story, okay? We've got Jesus. We've got all the people who are the crowd listening to Jesus. We've got this sick guy who's paralyzed. And then we've got these 4, we're just going to assume friends of the sick guy. All right, that's our who in our story. Then we've got a what. Right, so these guys, these friends of this sick man, hear that some healer, they don't know who Jesus Christ is. They don't know that he's the Messiah. They don't have the Bible to read, that this Jesus is the Messiah. They have prophecies and all of that they can maybe consider that he could be, but he's just another healer that is getting things done. And so they're like, man, our friend can't get there by himself. We've got to do something. We've got to get him to this Jesus. Why? They knew. They had heard the stories. And they had the faith that if they could just get their friend to the miracle worker, to encounter Jesus for himself, that he would be healed and made whole. So their faith created this drive and this tenacity to the point that when they got their friend in front of Jesus, Jesus said, it's their faith. This man's sins are forgiven because of them and their why, right? So the how of our story, they just adopted the whatever it takes. Where there's a will, there's a way. Sometimes, if we're going to be a part and contribute to somebody's one day, if we're going to contribute to somebody having that where life begins again moment, where they say yes to Jesus and the rest of their story changes, sometimes we're going to have to go out of our way. Sometimes we're going to be inconvenienced to do so. These men walked through, probably shoved their way through a crowd, and then proceeded to somehow climb up, hopefully a set of stairs, maybe a ladder, we don't have those details, to the rooftop that are very different than our rooftops here in Ohio and where I live in Seattle. But they literally proceeded to dig a hole. Can you imagine being in the room? Like you're listening to this great teacher and you're ready for him to like start the healing line because you've heard about him and you might think that he's the Messiah because if you grew up, in the culture, you're like watching for the signs and wonders and all of that and you're waiting and you all of a sudden, it's like when there's one raindrop, and you look at your friend, you're like, did you feel that? So you're like trying to pay attention to this great teacher and then like something else hits you and like dust and the sky is falling, like I don't know, like were people freaking out? I'm not totally sure, but then all of a sudden this guy was in front of him. And a miracle happened that day. I was reading a commentary from Charles Spurgeon, who is a great religious leader and theologian of the 1800s, and it's sort of lengthy, but it's about this passage in the Bible, and he said this, so we put it up on the screen for you. He said, smash or crash, everything shall go to pieces which stands between the soul and its God. It matters not what tiles are to be taken off, what plaster is to be digged up, or what boards are to be torn away, or what labor or trouble or expense we may be at. The soul is too precious for us to stand upon nice questions or excuses. If by any means we may save some, is our policy. Skin for skin, yea, all that we have is nothing comparable to a man's soul. Isn't that powerful? We have the opportunity, church, to be a part of something that's greater than ourselves. And I want to show you something through an illustration like this story. And I have some friends who are going to be helping me out. You guys can make your way up here. But there's something that happens when four true hearts come around the cause to help a sinner find their Savior. There's something that happens when we encounter Jesus Christ and we get a passion not only for ourselves to encounter Jesus, but for the people in our lives to encounter him as well. The miracle worker is available not only for you and me, but for your friend and for your coworker and for your family members and for the stranger that you come in contact with. God accepts everyone into his family. And maybe we could just consider today that we have a part to play in the situation. So these guys are helping me today. You're using two arms this service. Good job. That will go far in your muscle building. Hey, we're going to pretend like the man on the mat represents someone in your life who doesn't yet know Jesus. Okay, so that's our assumption today. They don't know Jesus. It's let's just pretend like it's a coworker. And if you're still in school and you don't have a job yet, think of it as a schoolmate, somebody that you go to school with, okay? That this person represents somebody that doesn't know Jesus in your life. And then let's just consider, for the sake of the illustration, that each of these corners represents a moment in the timeline of this person's life. So maybe you have, this first corner represents a grandparent who has been praying for the salvation of your coworker. You've never met this grandparent. You don't know that they exist, but they have picked up the corner of the mat of their grandchild, and they have been praying for his salvation. And then as you're going about your daily routine with this coworker, you don't know that this second point of the mat was a friend that they went to high school with, that believed in Jesus and lived a godly life, and yes, made mistakes, but always tried to live a life that loved Jesus and talked about it. And so those seeds of faith were planted as a young man. And then as you're, conversing with this coworker, you don't know that, 5 years ago, they had a tragic situation happen in their life, and they were in a funeral service, and a pastor said something about the Bible, and it stuck with them, but he just wasn't ready to act on it yet. I mean, we don't know all of the corners of the mat that are represented in the timeline of somebody's life, but maybe you are number 4. Maybe it's your turn to pick up that last corner of the mat. Maybe it's your turn to do your part and plant seeds of faith into this person's life. Maybe it's your turn, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to see them come sit beside you in a church service. And when that moment comes where they can say yes to Jesus, Jesus is working on their heart. Maybe you've invited somebody 178 times, and on invite number 179, they're going to say, you know what, I'm just going to come so you'll stop inviting me, so you'll stop bugging me. And that's the moment they walk in this campus and they hear the song they needed to hear, or they hear the prayer they needed to hear, or they hear the Bible message that they needed to hear, and God's got them. And all you had to do was do your part. Now maybe, this is an illustration, so there could be hundreds of people holding the mat, right, for one person. God will go to any lengths to not leave one behind. And so this is just for the sake of an illustration, but maybe instead of number 4, where you see the fruit of all of those seeds planted along the timeline of somebody's life, maybe you're the very first encounter that this person has had with Jesus. Do not give up. Do not be discouraged. Just because you talk about what Jesus has done in your life doesn't mean that everybody is ready to act on it and say yes to Jesus, but don't quiet your voice. Don't stop telling your story. Don't allow the fact that you don't know a Bible verse by heart, or that you don't know where that specific verse is in the Bible, or you don't know why bad things are happening on the planet. Don't let those be barriers to you telling your story of what Jesus has done in your life for your family or your friend. Don't let those be barriers, because God can work through your story to change the course of somebody else's story. Let's give it up for our friends. You guys are awesome. Thank you. So we start with what's in your hand. What's in your hand? How can you make a difference? Just by doing what you already do. But doing it through the filter that everything you do could be a contributor to somebody's one-day moment. If we look through the filter that we're on a mission, We're on a mission to spread the gospel. We're on a mission to spread the good news. We're on a mission to fill up that new auditorium with people from this surrounding community who are going to come through the doors, and they're going to say no to their addictions, and their marriages are going to get restored, and physical healing is going to happen, and families are going to come together. I mean, those are the things that we are believing for, that we are praying for, and that you can contribute toward when you just use your voice. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a degree in theology. You don't need to go to a seminary to be able to make a difference and share the good news of Jesus Christ. All you need to do is share your story. Well, one thing that I wrote down is just keep Jesus in your everyday. Keep Jesus in your everyday. This comes out of Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. It's in the Message Bible. I just love how it phrases it here. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what he does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. These men in Luke chapter 5, they heard the miracle worker was there. They got their friend on a mat. We don't know if they walked 2 blocks or 4 hours, okay? But they got their friend to the miracle worker, Jesus. And it wasn't some special service at the church. It wasn't some feast of some kind. It says one day. Just an average, ordinary day where they heard that Jesus was available and they made sure their friend got an audience with him. You know what the great thing about where we live and how we live and the current time and generation that we live in today? Jesus is available all the time. Everywhere we go. We don't need to compartmentalize it to Sunday mornings or Thursday nights or church buildings. We come together as the church to strengthen and unify and be able to refuel ourselves and be able to make a difference in our community because we're all coming together as one body at one time. But then we don't just leave God in the church building. Pastor Micah talked about it last week. Monday to Saturday is just as much a ministry as a Sunday morning. When you're going to work, when you're going to school, when you're on the football field, when you're on the court, whatever you're doing in your workday, in your house, where you're going, in your car, God is with you. Jesus Christ, the miracle worker, is available wherever we go. Keep Jesus in your everyday. A few years ago, I watched this documentary, and it was about juicing. When I first started talking about juicing, actually, it was awkward because afterwards, because I'm an athlete, so people would be like, juicing is like steroids, right? And I was like, no, I don't know I missed the bus. Like, I'm totally naive. I didn't know that. The juicing I'm talking about is vegetables and fruits in a juicing machine that you put the whole vegetable or fruit through, and it liquefies it, and then you have a juice. So I watched this documentary on juicing, that kind of juicing, and I had been having some health issues, and so I just decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try this whole juicing thing and see if it works. And sure enough, it did. And I found myself that entire year, every conversation I was having, like, it didn't start on a health topic or, a weight loss topic or a documentary topic or anything, but I would find my way into the conversation to, oh my gosh, I watched this documentary and it changed my life and it was this and that and I did it and it worked and blah and whatever. Like, every conversation. And then I had this epiphany moment one day, and I was like, man, if I can get nearly every conversation I have to the point where I'm talking about some documentary that, yeah, it was helpful physically, but it's not eternity. It's some health trend that's here today, gone tomorrow. Why couldn't we just get ourselves to look for opportunities to get Jesus into our everyday conversations, to find our way into a conversation where at some point we're saying, yeah, church was great this weekend. I met this couple out in the lobby, and it was just a God-assigned connection. Or, man, that new song that they sang at church last week, it really resonated with me, and I want to learn the words so that I can sing it outside of church. Or, man, when I said yes to Jesus 15 years ago, my life has completely changed. I mean, I don't know what words you would use in your conversations, but maybe if we flip the switch and just say, all right, I'm going to go into every day and find out how can I put Jesus into today. And not be scared about it, not be Bible thumping about it, not be like, you're going to hell if you don't love Jesus Christ. Don't be that person. Please, I walk by those people outside of stadiums and I'm like, I'm a Christian and I don't agree with them. Jesus loves you. It's a personal story. I don't want to share it. The second thing I wrote down, how you can pick up the corner of the mat, is that stop saying someday about someone's one day. Luke chapter 5, these men, they took their opportunity. They dug through mud. It was dirty. It was messy. They probably missed a day at work. I mean, they were inconvenienced. But they knew, they had the faith to believe that if they went out of their way for their friend, something was going to change in his life. His whole story was going to change. They wanted their friend to experience the miracle worker. And I wonder if we as Christians moved beyond just having good intentions. That is just a very static response. I want to, I should, I could, if I did, and I think about it, but I get stuck, but I have good intentions. If we could move beyond that to actually being intentional and putting actions behind our intentions and do something about it. This story in Luke 5, there's no recorded words from these men. Because why? Because their actions spoke much louder than any of their words possibly could. Jesus didn't even ask if their faith was strong. He saw their faith by their actions. If we're intentional and we just put on the lens of today is my opportunity to contribute to somebody's one day. I'm not asking you to carry the whole mat by yourself. I'm not asking you to bear the burden of somebody's salvation. That's not your burden to bear. That is up to Jesus Christ and his timing. He's the one who saves us. But what if instead of missing an opportunity to pick up your corner of somebody's mat, well, if I don't, then that person actually gets saved, and, can God still use? I mean, I've just missed so many corners in my life, and you're talking about this, and I'm so convicted, and I just don't even want to try because I've already messed it up so many times. Don't allow excuses of what's happened before keep you back from what you could do today and tomorrow. Our God is big enough. He could use somebody else. He can plant another seed of faith in that person. I believe that. You could sit in church for the next 20, 30, 50 years and never invite a single person to church. And if you said yes to Jesus Christ, you're going to go to heaven. You're going to be in eternity. It doesn't get you to heaven to bring other people to church. But isn't it cool to think that other people could make their way to heaven because you helped them get to an environment and a place in their heart where they were